interrelated. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. You can never be fully what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. All life is interrelated. As long as there is extreme poverty in the world, no one can be truly rich, even if he has $1 billion. With statements like these, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. articulated the philosophy which propelled his work in the area of social justice. For Dr. King, the struggle against racial discrimination was always interlocked with the struggle for an economic parity, the struggle against economic exploitation. Indeed, the civil rights movement, although it isn't always remembered that way, the civil rights movement was always oriented around such issues. The 1955 Montgomery bus boycott, the landmark protest which drew Dr. King into the front lines of the civil rights movement, one of the demands of that protest was the hiring of black bus drivers. The economic incentive, the economic goal was a part of that. We see that throughout the civil rights struggles. The 1963 March on Washington was, of course, the March for Jobs and Freedom. In his 1967 speech, Where Do We Go From Here?, Dr. King laid out a bold blueprint for what he called the economic restructuring of the whole American society. In that speech, Where Do We Go From Here?, Dr. King said, "We are called upon to help the discouraged beggars in life's marketplace, but one day we must come to see that an edifice which produces beggars is in need of restructuring." Rejecting the oft-mentioned conservative notion that unfettered market forces lead to jobs and prosperity, for the masses, Dr. King stated, "Dislocations in the marketplace of our economy and the prevalence of discrimination thrust people into idleness and bind them in constant or frequent unemployment against their will." Against their will. People on Capitol Hill and on right-wing radio are telling us that extending unemployment benefits for people who are out of work against their will is some kind of incentive to not work. Real people in the real world know better than that. But that is a ethos and philosophy, a notion that permeates the discussion around economic equality, economic parity. Dr. King was speaking to those issues, and we must recognize that as important as his focus on racial justice was his focus on economic justice.